Thank you. Just to add a footnote to his presentation, I moved here a year and a half ago from Miami, and I lived on Brickell Avenue, which was right down on the water. And when I first moved into our condo, I was given parking space, which is below sea level. So there was, all the parking there was pretty much below sea level. So when they instructed me as to where my parking spot was, I saw this big, giant pump. And I go, well, I feel pretty good, because if a hurricane comes, this pump's going to really take care of my car and the building. And he said, no, that's not really for the hurricane. That's basically for the high tides and things that come with king tide and the high tides. And so it was a bit of a reality check. And I did have another surrealistic experience after I moved here. We moved out to Lakewood Ranch. And when it was Irma, the one that came up the center of the state, right? And when Irma came up the center of the state, I'm sitting in my home going, I just moved from Miami over here. It's going to be very, very calm. I'm going to be very well protected. And I'm sitting out in Lakewood Ranch thinking, I'm going to get a direct hit from Irma. That's going to come right over the top of my house. And I turn on the TV, and here's the picture of my condo in Miami with the same storm, with 3 to 4 feet of water running up and down Brickell Avenue. So here I am going, I'm getting ready for a direct hit on my house, and I just moved out of that condo, and it's the same storm, and it is massive. So to me, that just struck home again in terms of extreme weather and how it can impact you. So I just thought I'd add that as a footnote. Okay, so thank you, Tom. I think that was great. I think what you're seeing from this morning, again, I think it's great to see we talked about the data from this morning, but now I think we're getting down to actually the nuts and bolts of what communities can do, what individuals can do, and we're going to hear more about that here in a minute. So our next presenter is Patricia Healy, and she's going to give us a very interesting perspective from a financial standpoint as well as infrastructure. She's also a water expert, and she is the Senior Vice President of Research and Portfolio Manager for Cumberland Advisors. So I'm very much looking forward to her presentation as well. So Patricia, welcome.
Thank you. Okay, settled. So good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. I was going to say I would go through this whole conference without hearing the word sustainability or resiliency. And my opening comment basically is adapting to a changing climate is part of being resilient and sustainable. And resiliency and sustainability don't just mean your infrastructure and how you're fortified to the water. It's financial. It's the taking care of your community. It's everything. So in order to be a continuing sustainable entity, you have to take care of a lot of things. And there were some conversations about silos and things like that, and those things should merge together. It's not just, and then I think you mentioned just recently, you've got fire, you've got schools, you've got other things. And, but transportation and infrastructure, that infrastructure should probably be integrated with water infrastructure and resiliency. So there's a lot to think about. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about municipalities and how they're on the forefront of dealing with climate change. I'm going to talk about municipal bonds as a major financing instrument that we have for infrastructure in the United States. And then I'll follow up with some national and local examples. So, okay, so following up also on Tom's comment is rating agencies do, in fact, consider climate risk in their analysis. These two first comments are almost lifted from Moody's and S&P's, now the top one being positive. Communities that are prepared to tackle sea level rise, flooding, hurricanes, and what the like can attract new businesses and residents. On the other hand, those that don't risk economic disruption, infrastructure damage, insufficient health and safety and services, and a population loss. So those are, the positive and negatives. But, there's other considerations that municipalities have. Right now, pensions are a big issue. OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, mostly retiree health care, those are ballooning. There's cybersecurity, which no one can afford to not worry about. There's affordability in general, whether it be housing or just living in a town. Education, healthcare spending, there's transportation, there's parks, there's the firefighters, there's all myriads of things that are other considerations that municipalities have. And they have to weigh these things with the cost and the benefit of being resilient in a climate sense. So also, ratings are based on more than one thing. Tom was surprised that the rating agencies spent so much time looking into how resilient and climate prepared the community is. And they're interested because it's becoming a bigger issue all around. The rating agencies kind of have the luxury when they have an issuer in front of them to ask them all the questions that they want to learn. So, and then they take that and they use it in their future analysis as well. So one thing I did want to mention is that when I was a rating agency analyst and I was working on water and electric and the sewer projects, it was the engineer that knew everything that was going on in a bond deal. They knew about the politics, they knew about the legal structure of the bonds, they knew why the financing was going on, they knew about the project that was being built. So I thought it was very interesting that an engineer today was kind of trying to pull everything together. The last thing there is Moody's recently, like just last week, put out the results of a survey of some of the largest cities in the debt issuing cities in the country. And it turns out that 57% of the respondents, not all of them, but do have a climate action plan in place, and 82% expect to have one completed by the end of this year. So that's good. It turns out that, and maybe it's not surprising, that flooding is the dominant risk that cities are preparing against. Some of the stuff we heard about this morning, sea level rise, lingering storms that drop a lot of water, and building cities with a lot of concrete that's not permeable, so, or putting bioswales or whatever you need to get the water to run out. Oh, one more thing. You'd think that a disaster would be a credit risk for a city. And so far, it really hasn't. I mean, we worry about the towns getting wiped out, like Mexico City, but from a lot of the storms that we've had, there's been a lot of devastation and destruction, but FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, comes in and, if it's been declared a disaster, reimburses almost up to 100% of the expenses. And you've got insurance, and you've got people rebuilding, and you've got people moving into a community rebuilding. So I did read one comment that said, oh, well, really, climate risk isn't a problem because FEMA's going to pay for everything. Well, that's not going to happen forever. So, you know, the money that does go into a community and the insurance proceeds brings a lot of economic activity. And sometimes communities end up having a lot more revenues after the initial disaster with all the rebuilding that goes on. So we haven't really seen a lot of rating changes because of it, but going forward, you know, the more there are disasters, the less other people are willing to pay for it, or the more expensive insurance gets, things will change, or may change. So here, municipalities are on the forefront of combating climate change. Employees are the first responders in a disaster, or one of the first responders in a disaster. You know, responsible for keeping the infrastructure resilient, and also they commit the bulk of the capital to build this, to build the infrastructure. Okay, there are over 80,000 municipalities thereabouts. They can issue various different types of debt, financing anything from fire trucks and computer systems to toll roads, electric power plants, parks, you name it, municipal bonds can finance it. There's about $3.8 trillion in municipal bonds outstanding currently. They have various security structures, from the general obligation taxing ability of the location to water revenues of a water treatment plant from the customers that get that water. Municipal bonds have very high credit quality. The average rating is AA, compared to the average rating of a corporate bond now is about BB. There's a very low default rate, especially related to corporate bonds, and notwithstanding Puerto Rico, Detroit, Jefferson County, those are some larger defaults that did occur for fraud or various reasons, but for the most part, municipalities are generally high credit quality. And I think most people know that most of the interest income earned on a municipal bond is exempt from federal taxation. And if you live in a town and you buy, or city, or state, and you buy that municipal bond, that income is also exempt from taxation. So it provides a very low financing cost for a municipality compared to like a bank loan or a taxable yield. And generally speaking, there's a good after-taxable equivalent yield. Okay, so in 2017, when we were afraid that municipal bonds were going to lose tax exemption for mostly private activity bonds, which finance airports, water and sewer systems, electric systems, hospitals, higher education institutions, the Municipal Bonds for America, which is a coalition of members in the municipal bond community, go to educate and lobby Congress. And I went with them back in 2017 and sat at an educational, I wasn't on the panel, but I was in the audience. And those of us that were in the audience were encouraged to talk to the staffers because the Congress people don't necessarily go to these education things. The staffers do. And really, and they're younger, and you try to tell them, you know, how much municipal bonds have done for our community and building our infrastructure. You know, the public-private partnerships, or P3s, are used globally a lot, and it's kind of a sexy term, and everybody hears about it. Everybody wants private people to invest in public infrastructure. It works in Europe. They have some very large projects. They have private companies that are operators, maybe lease something from government, but the government guarantees a payment stream to these private companies as well as an equity return. And they finance things like windmill farms and toll roads, healthcare organizations, lots of water, all different types of projects. To do that here in the United States, people are trying to do it, but they're coming up with the money to leverage it, and then finding the projects, and municipalities don't like to give up local control, so there's a bunch of issues that could maybe hold that back, not the least of which is we haven't come up with an infrastructure plan. So there's a lot of talk about it, and people are hopeful that this is something that both Democrats and Republicans want to have happen, but they don't seem to be able to agree on anything. So municipalities themselves need to move forward and finance this stuff because it just needs to be done at some point in time. So, oh, and I mean, the American Association of Civil Engineers has a report card on the nation's infrastructure. It's their 2017 report. They rate our infrastructure D+. So, and I think people know it. There's bridges falling down. There's water plants that are leaking water. There's water plants that are leaching lead. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be taken care of. Okay, so when I was a baby rating analyst, I was at Standard & Poor's looking at water, sewer, and electric plants. It was in the throes of a lot of construction that was going on as a result of the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act, as well as the Clean Air Act. There was a lot going on. There was a lot of construction projects for, you know, treating our water, treating our wastewater so that it wasn't polluting our rivers and our air and all that. There were grant funds related. There was technical assistance from the EPA and the local DEPs. And you know, a lot of work was done between the late 70s and 80s, and still going on. There's still plenty of places that are under consent decrees where they're still polluting above the level that they're allowed to pollute to. But we now, like I grew up in New York, you can now swim in the Hudson River if you want to. And for everyone that's here from the Midwest, you can now, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland isn't on fire any longer. So people can adapt, basically, is what I mean. There are environmental things that we can take care of. I mean, there was a giant federal law in place telling us we had to, but fast forward 10 years to a report came out called the Ripple Effect, and it was by an organization called Ceres, and they are a nonprofit that tries to foster climate change awareness, water scarcity awareness, and human rights awareness. And but this Ripple Effect said that municipal utilities, municipal analysts, and rating agencies were not taking into consideration water risk in everything that we were doing. And I totally disagreed with this because I had been dealing with water utilities and sewer utilities for 20 years. And or 10 years at that time, no, 20 years. So at any rate, at our annual meeting of the National Federation of Municipal Analysts, I had a panel that included the woman that wrote The Ripple Effect, a rating agency analyst, and the CFO from the San Diego County Water Authority. And we had a very lively discussion. And what I did want to say also, I get the feeling that this organization series is not just, tree hugging climate change kind of organization. They also bring people from all different thoughts around water and bring them together and convene them to try and come up with ideas and areas to look at and get people get an understanding for what the other side is thinking, almost like GIC, like the Global Interdependence Center, similar kind of thought. So at any rate, at the end of the panel discussion, we got a better understanding, and one of the things was everyone agreed that the larger utilities, the ones that had money, the bigger communities that had like a Longboat, even if it's a smaller community, but like with Longboat Key with a lot of intellectual capital, we're doing okay. It was the smaller, more rural entities or the further out ones or the poorer ones that didn't have the resources. So that was good to hear. I also appreciated how much detail Ceres went into digging down into things. Maybe you don't need to know that much to rate a bond, but it's helpful to know those things. And state revolving funds kind of grew out of that need. Basically, each state has a state revolving fund. Some of them issue bonds. They get federal seed money as well as state seed money. And what they do is they make low-interest loans to smaller communities or larger communities, but they're making low-interest loans, and they're giving technical assistance to the water and sewer systems, even trailer parks with they give loans to so that they can increase their water quality. Thanks. So these state revolving funds actually are a great investment because of the large amount of capital that's there and that they're revolving loans. There's a lot of cash flow and a lot of security. So many states issue these bonds. They're generally rated AAA or high AA. And so they're a great investment for if you want to have do sustainable investing or ESG investing or impact investing for affordability issues, because it does help with affordability and cleaning the environment. Okay. Whoa.
Stop and ask a question.
Okay.
Do you know if Sarasota County or City of Sarasota are taking advantage of these state revolving funds?
You know, I don't know. Do you? Okay. Yeah, I could find out too. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just quickly go through this because I think I'm running low on time. But there's a huge amount of. I was going to talk about the government shutdown. A lot of demographic information is not available. I tried to get some data, and I'd go to a government website, and I'd be like, no, we're not operating right now, so you're going to have to wait. I think David's written a few pieces on that as well. Municipal disclosure. Municipalities don't disclose information as well as corporations do. They're being forced to, and they're actually smarter to disclose more. And they are starting to disclose, and industry participants would like them to disclose their climate threats as well as their cybersecurity. And there's also the MSRB. You can go to their website, and it gives you a lot of information for individual investors to look at directly, an official statement, annual financial reports. It even has pricing data of bonds by CUSIP if you're interested. I'm also involved in some calls with the task force on climate-related financial disclosure. And I know we haven't talked that much about insurance, but I was on a call with this task force, and people in the insurance industry are using data and computer program power to drill down to individual assets at a company level or a country level or what have you. And it's amazing the stuff they can do. Like you could look at Coca-Cola and not even tell them that you're investigating, their plant over here, or it could be an oil company and they're over there. And or it could be a housing project and you want to see if they're near a Superfund site or a drought condition. So there's a lot of things going on with disclosure and information. Anyways, so following on the impact investing, just like I didn't really hear sustainability or resiliency, the term ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, is a way that a lot of people want to invest. A lot of the sovereign wealth funds, like big global investors, large pension funds like CalPERS, State Board of Administration here in Florida does ESG investing. A lot of people, and millennials, and people want to see that where they're investing is making an impact. There's the Climate Bond Initiative, where bonds are rated based on their strength in reducing our carbon footprint. And those ratings have to be maintained annually. It's not like you just get the rating and you say, oh, this company is reducing their carbon footprint. You know, every year you have to make sure they're living up to the Climate Bond Initiative standards. There are municipalities have issued self-designated green bonds, hoping, I mean, they want it, using it as a selling point. In the green bonds that we've seen issued that were self-designated, we're not seeing a difference in return. You're not getting a better pricing, or the issuer is not getting a lower yield yet. It could be because interest rates are lower, so spreads are compressed. But right now, we're not really seeing people really want the green bond more than the other, at least in the pricing. People may want it, but it's not affecting the pricing yet. And you know, as fiduciaries like Cumberland is, if we're investing and a client wants to invest in like affordable housing or something like that, you know, that would be an impact thing. But if the credit quality of the entity, even though they're trying to do a good social good, if it's not going to have a return or it's going to lose money for the client, we would not do that. And then there aren't a lot of municipal impact ratings, but the Municipal Impact Coalition is working feverishly now to come up with impact ratings for municipal bonds because there is investor demand for it. So to finish up, so I only have 6 things up there, but I have a ton of notes here of things just over the past few days that have cropped up as progress and examples. So the first off is about greenhouse gas emissions. The Bloomberg Philanthropies just finished its American Cities Climate Challenge. It chose 25 cities. It was 20. They expanded it to 25 cities. And 2 cities in Florida are Orlando and St. Petersburg, were chosen by Philanthropies. Each city gets about $2.5 million. They get a technical assistance that Bloomberg Philanthropies is paying for to help coordinate and take, you know, lessons that they've learned from other things to move cities forward to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And it's mostly along the lines of transportation and building, which the Bloomberg Philanthropies sees as the 2 largest greenhouse gas emitting functions or assets, infrastructure in a city. Now, talking about collaboration, I mean, I've read some stuff. The Governor DeSantis has basically said that there's going to be $2.5 billion in spending. Sorry, I got to put my glasses on. To protect and restore the Everglades and to clean up Florida's waters. He said, people of Florida wanted to see action, and this was action that was requested regardless of your party. So he's setting up a resiliency office and appointing a chief science officer. At least that's what's been said. So that's a good step, and I think what people were talking about today in kind of bringing people together. A couple of years ago, I looked into the Central Florida Water Initiative, which is, so it's at the confluence of 3 water management districts, the Southwest, the St. John's, and the South Florida, and it's about the Floridan aquifer. And there are so many, the initiative includes not just towns and utilities, it includes companies, it includes universities, it includes developers, it's anyone that's a stakeholder there. And they have to coordinate because the aquifer is in 3 different geographical boundaries, but they're not the same boundaries as a watershed, so you kind of need to work together. So you can't give a water withdrawal permit at one side, it'll affect the aquifer in another side, so they really need to coordinate. Apparently, I was talking to an engineer at the St. John's River Water Management District, and she said that they actually needed some legislation to get them to really coordinate better. So that may be a story you want to look into. I was discussing climate change. What are you doing for climate change? Because really they're just managing the aquifer, making sure that there's enough water for everyone. They're getting the farmers to use less water. They're, the mining that goes on, they're trying to use less water. And so what are you doing? What do you think the organization's doing for climate change? Well, not really, the climate change stuff we're talking about, but maybe one of the things that we would have to prepare for is an influx of population from the people leaving the coast and coming inland. So that was not as good a joke as I thought, but anyway. Miami, Greg just spoke about Miami. They have the Forever Miami plan. At least half of the $400 million program is going to be for climate resiliency and the Brickell Road improvements and things like that. And, Miami was on your list. Whose list had it as one of the, most vulnerable cities in the world as far as climate. San Francisco's bondholders last year approved building a seawall for about $5 billion. That would be over 30 years. Another joke that didn't go over very well. Okay. And finally, Phoenix, which is kind of different. It's inland, but its temperature has been going up and up and up. And, most of their water is surface water, and that's evaporating. So what they need to do is make their system redundant. They need more reservoirs. They're drilling more wells. They're building bigger reservoirs, covering them. It's kind of hard. It's very hot out there. So that they've got the other issue. They have less water. So I heard this locally, and I don't know if anyone mentioned it, the Tampa Bay Resiliency Coalition just formed, similar to the Southeast Florida regional one that's down in Florida. So 5 counties, 20 cities. So that's a good start for people getting together to talk. And Bob was just mentioning we need a bridge. So I know someone who works at Ceres now, which is that think tank investor organization, who used to be at the State Board of Administration. And there was recently a conference. Oh, I have the wrong one. Sorry. At any rate, there's a global entity that's organizing called The Bridge, and it stands for, I don't have it in front of me, I apologize. But it's basically a global organization that just met at the Breakers in December. Some said I missed the conference. And basically, University of Florida is associated with it. It's called The Bridge, and it's basically globally, it's an organization set up to globally look at coastline erosion. So that's their, I can get more information for you guys on it. Sorry, I didn't have that there. And finally, so I heard someone in the insurance industry say on a conference, yeah, the moment you put a shovel in the ground, you change the risk by providing relief to climate risk and preventing asset damage. But you really first need to determine the risks, build a consensus, come up with a plan, and then determine and execute the financing. And I think it's kind of what was discussed all throughout the day, and I'm kind of glad that we're all on the same page. But I think some of these examples here show that people are moving in that direction, especially what the town of Longboat Key is doing and other organizations. We've done it in the past, and New York City had a water supply and planned it like 100 years in advance, so it can be done. Anyway, thank you. Okay, yeah, I don't know. Any questions? Yes.
You mentioned the CDI.
Yes.
Is there any of that going on in Florida or in our area at all?
I don't think so. I'm not, it's an initiative. It's more on the corporate side, right? Investors are looking to have, to know if they're adhering to various standards. So in municipal land, I don't see it that much, but I know that it's there. I know that there's a ton of agencies or rating agencies or verifiers. I mean, there's a list of about 20 of them, all trying to capitalize on providing verifying ratings, and there are some trying to implement that into the municipal space, but the information is not as consistent as in the corporate space. So I think that's part of the issue. Yes?
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you for bringing economics into this conversation. This is where the future we get will be the one we choose to buy. So, and the mitigation or the remediation side is a part of this, but the transition to a renewable resource economy from basically a fuel bank account, carbon-based fuels, to an income energy economy is the economic opportunity of our day. We've been talking about incubators and where investment can go. And you mentioned Ceres. Ceres also has their Clean Trillion initiative. Basically, they're saying we can avert the baddest part of climate change with $1 trillion investment in renewable energy. And you can bring that home to Florida, the Sunshine State, and all the marvelous things we can do here to make a difference. And so I hope this conference continues with a deeper conversation in adaptation and all the marvelous ways that we can move beyond the fossil fuel age and into the long-term future.
Right, and I hope it came through in my comments that, and maybe I glossed over it because I felt like we were going through too much time, but the investor community out there is, especially larger investors, are really driving some of the change that's going on. They're requiring that companies do this. They're looking at, what their water risk is, what their emissions are. And actually, the series brings companies and investors and think tanks and everything together. I was at a conference with them, and the almond board was part of the conference because almonds use most of the water in California. But investors are driving this, and investors do want to see impact. So, and younger people are growing up through the education process, hearing that their world is not going to be there for them or their grandkids. So they want to make sure stuff happens. So, and even companies themselves are. So sustainability and resiliency are about being around for the long term. If you look back, corporate raider times, they just took companies, tore them apart, and sold them off for the pieces. Now, I mean, that's still happening, but companies are looking at how can we be around for the long term, and how can we give the best long-term return for our investors and for the company's long-term ability. So yeah, I think all this is coming together that maybe it'll push things in that direction. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Patricia. We are now in the home stretch. We have one final panel, which I think will be very, very interesting as well, because it's going to bring together lots of very diverse group of individuals. And so I'm going to stay out of the way and introduce the moderator. So I'd like to introduce Jennifer Schaefer from Schaefer Consulting. She's the owner and principal of Schaefer Consulting and the executive director of Science and Environmental Council of Southwest Florida, who's also a sponsor for today. So not only do we appreciate your sponsorship of the event, but we also appreciate your willingness to moderate the panel. So with that, I will get out of the way and let her bring in the panelists. And you want to try to move this up, right? Can we move the chair?
Right, I'd like to invite the panelists up, please. We're going to rearrange the furniture real quick. In the meantime, Science and Environment Council is very pleased to be a named sponsor of the event through a private donor, actually. And I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to the Science and Environment Council. We are a coalition of 35 leading science-based organizations in the Sarasota and Manatee region. Our members include cities, counties, our state parks, colleges and universities, including the University of South Florida, Sarasota-Manatee, and our 3 national estuary programs along the coast, as well as several dozen nonprofits. In fact, I see a lot of friendly faces in the audience. If you wouldn't mind, if you're with one of our member organizations, please stand. We meet quarterly. We share information, ideas, we work collaboratively on environmental issues. Take a look around, introduce yourself to one of these folks. We are a resource for the community, and we're really pleased to be here. Great, come on up. So our three panelists, Stevie, David, and Ed, I will refer you to the program for their illustrious qualifications. I actually know Stevie and Ed pretty well. David, we spoke on the phone, and I know they all have really great stories to tell. So I'm going to do just light moderation of this panel. I'd like to give our panelists an opportunity to tell their stories. I believe Stevie has some slides. And then we'll reconvene as a panel to kind of tie it all together with a few questions. And then I definitely want to throw it out to you to get your questions for the panelists. This feels very dramatic.
Kind of dramatic here.
Let's start with Stevie, since we've got the screen and the slides ready.
Great.
So Stevie's going to tell us her story from the perspective of the City of Sarasota. She's the Sustainability Director.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Is it okay if I sit or should I stand? Sit is fine. Okay, great. That sounds great. Let me see which direction I'm going. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Stevie Freeman Montez. I work as the Sustainability Manager in the City Manager's Office at the City of Sarasota. And I'm so glad to be here today. I see a lot of familiar faces. I also see a lot of new faces. So I'm really excited, especially for the new faces, for those who may not know about some of the City of Sarasota's climate adaptation planning process, to tell you a little bit about how we went about it. And really, I'm going to save a lot of the details for hopefully for the question and answer portion. And it was especially exciting to come after Town Manager Tom Harmer. I mean, what incredible work coming out of Town of Longboat, and really exciting to collaborate and work with their staff level on these issues. So the whole reason why the City of Sarasota embarked in 2016, we started our Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment and Adaptation Plan. The whole reason really was to ensure that our public services were resilient into the future. We provide critical public services, of course, as you all know, wastewater treatment, water pumping, roads, stormwater. Well, we partner with the county for our stormwater management, but we have really important assets in each one of those sectors that, as we're planning and upgrading them over time, it was absolutely critical for us to be better and more well-versed on our planning for sea level rise and climate adaptation. So all of that really gets us being competitive and resilient city, and to also really elevate city staff's climate literacy. All of us were a little, needed some training on how to use scenario-based projections and future projections within our wastewater planning staff and our stormwater staff and our public works. So all of us really got together and took a deep dive over a 1.5-year process to create this plan. I want to be clear that how the City of Sarasota went about it is we started with our government-owned infrastructure. We analyzed 220 critical assets that we own in 7 different sectors, and we wanted to understand where we were vulnerable to future climate conditions. Then we wanted to prioritize those assets and identify adaptation strategies for them. So that's exactly what we did, and was unanimously approved by our City Commission in January of 2018. And over the last year, we've been on full kind of implementation on some of those priority projects. So there's also huge opportunity to look more at neighborhood scale vulnerabilities and adaptation in business districts and the private sector, and that's something that we're trying to tackle too, that I can talk about. But this plan was strictly on kind of city-owned assets and infrastructure. So we went through a 6-step process where we identified what climate adaptation or what climate projections we were going to use for our sea level rise, storm surge, precipitation, and heat projections. And we had the commission kind of vote on those. Then we did an asset inventory. We got a huge internal team together and said, what are our critical infrastructure? We went down to individual outfalls to our bay, to individual lift stations and pump stations, and we did a huge inventory list. And then that's where we did our vulnerability assessment, where we overlaid future projections. And it told us very clearly where we were vulnerable, then we prioritize those, and I'll tell you a little bit about how we prioritize those. These are just the 7 different sectors that we looked at and the total number of assets that we assessed for how we were vulnerable. We focused on evacuation routes and critical assets. What we did was a really quantitative evaluation of each individual asset where we looked at the vulnerability score and risk score. And each of those, you can see this is a picture of a team meeting here. Each of those have their own methodology. I won't bore you with that, but we went into a lot of detail and scored the sensitivity and adaptive capacity and likelihood and consequence. And that's for each of those 220 assets. And we plotted them essentially. And if an asset was both highly vulnerable and highly at risk, and if it bubbled up to that top right-hand box, then it was a priority, and we needed to take it into the next step and create adaptation strategy for it. So the report that we have has tons of detail, but just an example, this is our transportation graph of our results of where we were vulnerable, and we have this graph and similar results for all of those 7 sectors. So here's our stormwater, and it really helped us kind of pluck out the assets in that box and tell us what we need to address sooner rather than later. And as I mentioned, we created adaptation strategies. This is just taken from the report to kind of show for each of our priorities how we have different strategies, very high-level strategies at this point. But what it helped us do also is go to funding. We now know through our capital improvement and investing in our infrastructure what our priorities are through a very clear quantitative system. And we've even applied for grants. We just received this year $184,000 from Florida Department of Environmental Protection Coastal Resilience Program for a living shoreline project. And it was clearly shown how this was a vulnerable shoreline through our adaptation plan, and it really helped us get those funds. We've kind of gone over in the other presentations just the benefits of, adaptation planning to our local economy. So we see real jobs coming out of the projects that we're moving forward with. And to get to Andy Tugendhat, I think, asked the question about mitigation and adaptation. Part of our work at the City of Sarasota, too, has been committing to 100% renewable energy for both community-wide. Our commission set a target for 100% by 2045, and then for city operations, 100% renewable energy by 2030. So we've prioritized strategies to reach that goal if they had a climate adaptation synergy or nexus, and we kind of bumped those and gave those higher points. So I think that's an example, just one example of how you can try to make sure that you look at projects that can create kind of dual benefits in that way. So I don't want to take too much time. I know this is just supposed to be kind of an introduction. I was given 8 minutes. But I just wanted to share kind of at that high level the amount of work that the city has undertaken. And I think we'll talk about this maybe more on the panel, but we do a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of groups that we're a part of, and we work very closely with the planning staff at Town of Longboat. And I facilitate a group called the Intergovernmental Climate Working Group, and it has representatives from staff within each jurisdiction in Sarasota County. So Venice, Northport, Longboat, myself, the Estuary Program, and we have Manatee County as well. Rob's here. We all get together and share climate data, share climate lessons, and we receive training. And that's just one example of some collaborations we do, and there are definitely others. But I'll stop there.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll touch on that again during our questions.
Thank you.
Wow.
So this is meant to be a panel about how we make lemonade out of lemons. So hopefully you'll be hearing some of the upside to climate adaptation planning. So I'll let David take it next.
Thank you. When I came up here and I knew we were last, I felt like, we're like the last piece of pizza. We come in hot. Bob gave a great presentation. How you're even awake this long, I don't know. But God bless you. And then Bob too did his thing, and Lenny, and and everybody who stayed, thank you. For those that left, they were full, and so we have a little bit more to shove in your mouth here and just kind of absorb. As an insurance guy, we kind of take a look at it from a very unique standpoint. We were rocked, as you all well know, in 1990s with Hurricane Andrew. It was a hurricane that shifted the paradigm of thought in terms of building codes, in terms of how intense that catastrophe was. But really what has hurt us or has changed us a bit is the last 15, 20 years. If you look back in 2004, Charlie and Jean and Francis and Wilma and Rita and Ivan, 2005, it was the repetitive nature of hurricanes. It was the intensity of hurricanes. My gray hair occurred in 2004 and 5. It was not my 4 kids. It was not my 2 daughters. Okay? Those 2 years were so intense. And as we look at it, the 17th largest nation, okay, $1 trillion of insurable assets. We insure billions. And it's a unique thing because it's based on past data. It's historic models predicting the future. But nothing could have predicted repetitive, intense hurricanes like 2004 and 5. You can't do it. And then you turn around and you have, moving up a little bit, you get Harvey. We could have walked faster than Harvey moved. That's no lie. There are runners, bicyclists, who went further than Harvey moved, dumping 60 inches of rain. There wasn't a model that ever predicted that could have happened. There's not a model that said, oh, by the way, it's going to stall. It was interesting when Bob asked me to come up here and we're going to talk about climate change. I was like, we're not debating this, are we? The obvious is in the front of our nose. He goes, no. We're trying to understand the impact. I said, okay, I'm in. But don't get me involved in a debate. That's past, at least in our world. So from that standpoint, we go to 2017 and 18. Again, rocked by multiple hurricanes, more intense and more severe than 2004 and 5. Matter of fact, the top 5 or 6 hurricane disasters occurred in the last 15 years. So you take all the models and they scratch their head and they go, uh-oh, we used to think about wind. Now we have to think about surge. We have to think about how much rain will fall that will create the flood. I talk about ark building. I'm Moses. I mean, what are you going to do? So all of this has disrupted how they model. It has thrown the old modeling out and brought in new models in. We have climatologists being hired, not by our firm, but others that do the analytics behind this. Scientists, and others that are trying to piece together how do we look at the modeling today to predict the future, because we have to put a rate on it, and we have to put a premium on it. I'm an expense, and I know you don't like to pay for me. Right? So there's ways we mitigate that. Building mitigation today is a 4-page engineering process. It deals with the length of a nail, the width of a nail as it's pounded into plywood, how the roof is tied down to the trusses, how the windows are created, the doorways going one way versus another because their frames have to be built differently, the garage doors. So when we first started mitigation after 2004 and 5, it was very, very raw. It was grade schoolish. Today, it's a 4-page mitigation form with documents to say to an underwriter who's modeling that property is worth it. We have gotten down to a granular level. Building by building, we will rate you for who you are. And if you don't want to build it right, I'm going to collect the premium for it. You want to build it correctly, I'm going to give you discounts. And those discounts you deserve because you're thinking outside the box. Now we're mandating that. The problem is on the flood side. It was a government program. It's $20 billion in debt and counting. A legacy program subsidized by the government that charged 10 cents on the dollar for the risk that you built. No one thought this was going to happen, that climate change was going to happen. So now surge and flood is as disastrous as wind. But we only talked about wind mitigation. We haven't talked about flood mitigation. So private flood carriers are trying to dip into this market. And they knock on the door of the government and say, can I have your loss data? And they're like, what? Well, we need information to model. Good luck. So we struggle there. So the private floods cannot come in fast enough to save us. And in some cases, they don't want to. They'll let the government deal with the repetitive losses as they continue to pay out for the same structure that would be built in the same place as before, and we were just giving them money to do it again and again. So the foolishness and the flood program has to stop. It needs to move forward a little bit as aggressively as we were moving the wind program after the hurricanes of 2004 and 5. So we're learning. Florida actually leads in how we're learning because we've dealt with so much chaos. Other coastal communities steal information from us. That's some of the collaboration that we need. We need more of it. The house that was standing, that Bob was talking about, okay, they engineered above and beyond the mitigation. Future thinking even beyond that. They were 25 years out, 50 years out from that. That's what we need. So a finance entity like insurance, we don't move fast. We don't. We're getting there because if we don't, citizens in our state will own us again like they did back in 2005 and 6 and 7. Citizens will be us, will be running the insurance program. That's not healthy. Just look at the flood program and you understand why. So we're getting there. We need more. We're doing more. Never as fast as we want, but faster than you think, because we know as certain premiums get high, I come in as Darth Vader and you'd rather see me as Superman, right? That's it. Thanks.
And continuing with local stories, Ed, how is the Child's Restaurant Group making lemonade?
Well, we are participating in a lot of ways that I think are important, and we're trying to be a model for how do we do things right. We're out on the edge, right? We're on the very front line, and what David was talking about with flood insurance certainly rings true, as I have 2 waterfront, Gulfront restaurants on Anna Maria Island and one on Longboat Key. We're experiencing a new words in the lexicon, king tides. I don't ever remember king tides, and I've been coming to Anna Maria since before I can remember. And now we get king tides on a regular basis, and we get some serious coastal flooding, and we're all aware of that in this area. All the talk about hurricanes and hurricanes being more severe, water warming is a terrible problem for us with not only hurricanes, but Lenny Landau will tell you, and Sandy Gilbert and the folks from START will tell you that that's a terrible problem for red tide, right? Warmer water, nutrients are growing faster. And what we have gone through, I don't really feel like lemonade right now. I'm afraid. What we went through over the last 5 months here locally, from the middle of August until I guess it was mid-December, and what our state, the whole state, of which 80% of the economy of this state is on the coast, but the whole state, Southeast Florida and Southwest Florida, and now up into Jacksonville and even up into Alabama with red tide, and in longer lasting red tides that are making the water where it is not as productive for cleaning up the water. I mean, we need to all understand we're in a very unique area here. We heal the Gulf of Mexico, which is in serious problem right now. And one of the major thing that we can do to heal this Gulf of Mexico is make sure that our national estuaries are in good shape. We're the only place in the country that has 3 national estuaries on its border. This is the nursery for the Gulf of Mexico. And if our coastal waters here are not in good shape, if they're not producing all of that photosynthesis and all of that thing that is great for the marine environment, then that's accelerating everything that we're doing. And, I am afraid I don't want to be at a tipping point. I don't want to worry that if this red tide continues to come, that there are going to be dominoes that start to fall. And if that happens, it could be a new that is unthinkable. But are we at that edge? And what are we doing about it? Well, I know what we've done in the last 30 years about it for water quality issues in the state and along this coast, and I know we've gone the wrong direction, all right? Winston Churchill said, never waste a crisis. This crisis that we have had, that has had everybody's hair on fire, that has politicians and policymakers now wanting to pay attention, wanting to be able to talk about what they are doing to protect our local waters, this is an opportunity. We've got to all come together and we've got to act. It is not just what's going in Lake Okeechobee, not just what's coming out of Lake Okeechobee, it's what's going in Lake Okeechobee. It's what we're doing in our lawns and any coastal community. It's anybody that is nutrient loading on inland waters or in the marine environment. We need to ask them, what national security concern do you have that we're not aware of that allows you to protect our or to pollute our inland environment, water environment, or our marine environment? We need to have high school and junior high school kids saying to these policymakers, you need to act. You need to get out of the way, because this is our future now. Think about if we're the generation that leaves this mess. And I don't want to be thinking about that. I want to be thinking about positive things, like how we show that what we do here with sustainable aquaculture and clams, we're the best place in the country to go clams, and nobody knows about that. We have 287,000 acres of shellfish approved waters in this state of Florida, and 1% are leased. Everybody talks about scallops, and scallops are great. Scallops are great. They're also the canary in the mine, because they fall off the branch when you sneeze. They last 13 months. We need to be doing more things with clams, because clams last 35 years, and they clean gallons and gallons of water a day, and they clean and they promote the benthic environment, because the state in their wisdom makes you get your clam leases on a place that doesn't have any seagrass. And Dr. Crosby from Moat will tell you, if you put the clams in 3 years later, you will have seagrass. So let's be about that, right? We're about small A agriculture and seafood since man and woman walked on 2 feet in these areas. And so let's do agriculture right. And so that's why we've taken our farm and gone from 50% organic to 100%. That's why in our restaurant, we're trying to be a model for local products that we're not transporting, and that promote economic development, that talk about local agriculture, that are building soil. That's why we're producing hemp-fed pigs and hemp-fed Wagyu Holstein cows in Middle Tennessee. That's right. Hemp-fed pigs and hemp-fed cows, all right? Because every time that we can take an acre out of the big 5, corn, wheat, soy, rice, and put it into hemp, that will make fiber, that will feed animals, that is good for body products and everything else, then we are helping carbon sequestration. So the things that we are doing in this area can be a model, but we've got to have everybody coming to the table. And we have to go after this in terms of the full spectrum, whether it's somebody impounding water, whether it's stormwater management for counties. I'm delighted to see what Longboat Key is doing, and we're working with it on some of these regards. What Prestanzia is doing and Sandy Gilbert is working on with START, with what's going on with stormwater management issues and all the small ponds and biochar, and what we do with clams, and what we do with seagrass restorations, and what we do with programs like our Gulf Coast Oyster Restoration and Recycling Project that I'll end with. Our COO, Robert Ball, came down from Charleston. He had been involved in a program like that in Charleston. We have a lot of clam shells and oyster shells that go into the landfill. So Robert diverted that. He carted them himself. We got a program started with START that Sandy Gilbert worked on in the county and Sarasota Baywatch and our restaurants, and we diverted just from our 3 restaurants 80,000 pounds of clams and oyster shells in about 11 months from the landfill. And those oyster shells then, in conjunction with the county, go out to Perico, where they are bagged and where they are used for shore restoration. and for bivalve restoration, because the larva of bivalves, which becomes spat or seed once it attaches to something, wants to attach to a hard, slick surface. The best surface is those clamshells. So let's take them out of the landfill and let's put them on the bottom. And now, because of the work that Sandy Gilbert has done and START has done, we have 7 more restaurants that have joined us, and that makes us, and we have got a carting contract with Waste Pro. Thank you very much for those restaurants. And that makes us the biggest program of its kind of any county in the state. Now, we need to grow that from 10 to 100, and we need to see that being done in every other area. And oh, by the way, while we're carting, let's do it out at the port. And let's take we have the #1 clam seed farmer in the country, lives right here in Terracea. His name is Kurt Himmel. All of the sunray clams that you're starting to see around in restaurants and the hard shell clams come from Kurt's seed, from North Carolina on down. We can be a model for this area, and we can take the program that they're doing now on the Chesapeake Bay and that they're doing now in Louisiana, where they are spawning bivalves over that substrate and then broadcasting that out into the waters. And so you're exponentially ramping that up. Manatee River used to be called the Oyster River. That's a fact. You couldn't navigate it. There were so many oysters. Those oysters are the roadbed for the interstate and a lot of the roads around this area. So that's another thing that we can do. And that's what we've got to pick, all of the things that we can do, and we've got to get people motivated, and we've got to get them coalesced, and we have to demand action on the city, on the state, on the private, on the individual, on the regional, and on the national level.
I knew that last pizza would be good.
That was some sweet lemonade. All right, I want to ask the panel just a few questions to kind of tie these themes together, and then I'll throw it out to you. We've heard throughout the day the need for regional cooperation, for coalescing, for working together, and I wanted to ask each of you, what are some of the specific opportunities in your sector that you see for doing just that?
I'll start off. Yeah, we're part of many collaborations, and I think there's a lot to talk about there. But one is definitely the Climate Council of Sarasota-Manatee, which is a sub kind of program of the Science and Environment Council. The goal of the Climate Council of Sarasota-Manatee is to really work across sectors. So it's not just like I spoke about the Intergovernmental Climate Working Group that I facilitate here locally that we all get together on. This is a cross sector, and we're aimed at trying to better the education across sectors. So we're all talking the same talk, that we're relaying the same projections in the same way and trying to do education and training better. And it's a facilitated network of practitioners across sectors on climate issues. And it's a great start. It's still getting its feet grounded, and that's a great opportunity there. And then also the city of Sarasota was the first city in the area to sign on to the new Tampa Bay Regional Resiliency Coalition, and that is a new and exciting kind of compact that I look forward to seeing it roll out to some of our other jurisdictions. But that's really looking at regional planning and how we can be more efficient with planning around climate change regionally. So those are the two I can think of offhand.
If you think about insurance, it's all about spreading risk. You have your first layer of risk is called the deductible. After that, you have insurance carriers and you have reinsurance carriers. Reinsurance carriers insure insurance carriers. It's a big global system. And rather than just being isolated into the world of the past, again, they open themselves up to hiring climate people. They're hiring other disciplines to help build the models to predict the future. And that is so fundamentally important, so they're not just seeing it in an isolated world. And by erasing the board and using modeling and thinking about it a bit differently than they have in the past, it will help us figure out how to go ahead and have a rate and a premium that's still manageable. In addition, you can see mitigation, building mitigation, working with engineers to say how can we get better at building so we can go ahead and rate it correctly at a granular level. These sort of things are happening They just need to be applied aggressively to the flood side. And that way they both coexist.
Let me ask a quick follow-up to that. Where does the Sarasota area stand in the eyes of the reinsurance industry with regard to risk? Are we doing the right thing?
Yes and no. I mean, the reality is 40% of all hurricanes will touch Florida in some way or form. So the stats are there. And what is troubling to them is, there's the old Florida and the new Florida. There's the beautiful Florida that is like Anna Maria Island, so many beautiful little areas in that, but they're not mitigated to withstand hurricanes. So when you get the new roofs, you get new windows, they would love to see that more aggressive. When it comes to flood, there's community discounts that are given, community rating discounts. Basically, it's a community that's involved in flood, and based upon how aggressively the community adheres itself to opportunities within the flood program, you get discounts. But it's a voluntary program. It's not mandatory. Of the approximately 300 communities in Florida that participate, only 15% have an aggressive rating. The scale is 10 to 1, one being most aggressive. Only 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, only about 15% of the people that participate are allowed to go ahead and use the deeper discounts. Discounts between 25 and 45%. It's not mandatory, not enough for doing it, but we're getting there. It's just going to take some more time.
I think collaboration is one of the most powerful dynamics in the universe. And I know this area is, we're an exceptional area, Manatee and Sarasota. We have a tremendous high quality of our community organizations here. We have a bunch of foundations. I see John Thaxton sitting in the back of the room from the Gulf Coast Community Foundation, which has really been out front on these issues that deal with our marine environment. And tons of environmental groups, and I'm a member of a number of them, and I've talked about START a couple of times, but too often we get wadded up in our own shorts. And we've got little petty things that are going on, or this, that, and the other. And we need now to be united in that loud voice that is demanding action on what we do. And I think that's just we cannot afford not to be singing off the same page and not have a good strategy for dealing with these issues before they are too late. All knowing that it may be too late, but we better be doing everything we can to turn this clock back.
So I wanted to get into some specific examples of innovation. So in your sector, again, in municipal governance, in insurance, in the restaurant industry, what are some of the trends that we're going to be seeing? What are the innovation trends that we're looking for with regard to climate adaptation or mitigation? What's coming down the pike that's really going to be a game changer?
Well, the government sector is not known for its innovation necessarily by any means, but I think for me, what I'm seeing a lot of exciting things come out is shoreline resiliency. So we're obviously, similar to Longboat, the coastline is an issue. How we deal with our shoreline and the interaction of the water and the land is critical. So we're definitely looking at a lot more designs of living shorelines and the importance of living shorelines and maintaining as much living shorelines where we can. And we recently piloted a small living seawall where we added habitat modules in front of O'Leary's to test and see kind of how those reef balls and living seawalls go. So I think there's going to be a lot more innovation in the shoreline interaction, and I think really encouraging and finding ways to actually remove some of our hardening even where it's possible and do more softened shorelines is an exciting innovation that's going to come. What that looks like.
I think it's interesting. I had a very similar slide that Bob presented earlier, and we had talked about this. It's that one building that withstood Hurricane Michael. And so, you look at that, and they were very innovative. It cost 20% more. We realize that. But you're going to pay now or you're going to pay later. So the reality is you go to those folks and you go into the building construction industry and you continue to work on building the industries like the PGTs and others that are going to create something that can withstand a good hurricane. And the same thing when it comes to the flood venting that needs to occur. That will handle all of this. So as much as I talk about mitigation and in the positive, is it good enough? The ones that withstood that hurricane, those individuals who've been interviewed many times, they went above and beyond. They said, if this is the standard, let me look out a little bit further. And they challenged the status quo. And that's what we have to continue to do. So the innovation is really going to come on the building construction side as they continue to go ahead and say the type of garage doors, the type of windows, the type of roof system, the type of pillars, all of that has to be brought together as a standard. And again, I go back, you're either going to pay now or you're going to pay later.
12% of the world economy is tourism, and we're a tourist area. So, what we need to do is to make sure, as a part of that industry, that we are using best practices, whether it's what we're doing for our to-go or whether we're trying to recycle, composting, using local products, right? Food, 12% is tourism. Think how much food is of the economy and of the national economy, and think how important that is to what happens with methane and what goes into landfills or doesn't go into landfills. And so the best thing we can be is a model, and the best thing we can do for our restaurants, the best thing we can do for our local economy, the best thing that I can do for my fishermen is to sell mullet, not sell grouper that's from the Caribbean or from South America, right? It's to promote local sustainable seafood. It's to buy from local vendors that aren't shipping all the way across the country or that's coming being in and boxed out from what country that we don't know. All of those things are things that we can do as a restaurant business and a tourism industry and a restaurant industry to help be greener and to help turn back the clock.
Great, thanks.
I just wanted to add on, because sometimes when I hear the word innovation and hear that promoted so much, I automatically think of science and technology and engineering solutions, which are absolutely critical and have done so much for our world. But I think it's so important for us to think of the innovation that's inherent in natural systems. And for us to look and not be afraid. I think us humans sometimes want to engineer a solution where so often if we were to, resist that urge and go back to a natural solution, it could be, the best in so many ways. So the innovation takes me back to that thought.
I wish we could engineer our mindset and get everybody on the same platform. That'd be very, very helpful.
All right, do I have someone who is willing to carry the microphone around? Let me steal one. Sure. All right, I know you guys have some questions. Let's hear them. Anyone? For our esteemed panelists. Was that a hand? No? Yes, Susan. There's... Oh.
I know we haven't tried to address what Congress might help with, but yesterday in the House of Representatives, a bill was introduced in a bipartisan manner called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act that plans to put a price on carbon that starts low and increases annually. And the monies from this will be given as dividends to all the American people, which would give people a chance to become innovative. How do you see this helping in this area?
I think we're all connected by one air, so anything that is shown to prove to reduce carbon-based fuel is positive for our area, even though I think a lot of times we think of our electricity and fuel sources as we're disconnected from the source and where they are at. So having a carbon fee or a market system that reduces and supports carbon-based fuel, it seems like a positive thing. Of course, I'm representing a political organization, the City of Sarasota, which I know, I'm sure they have their own stance and everything. But in general, I think anything that we can do from a market standpoint and an incentive standpoint to reduce carbon-based fuel is incredible locally for our own local air quality and emissions and everything, and something that we have to be more tied to, and connected to how that's sourced and provided to us.
Yeah, I would support a carbon tax, certainly done the right way. I don't think we could be timid about this anymore. I'll tell you a little story that just made me want to go postal. We rebuilt all 3 of our restaurants. The Mar Vista, little plug, is almost done now, and over the last 10 years, to make them stronger. The Sandbar restaurant was 2 Army barracks that were put on the site in 1945, and it had telephone poles for a foundation that had rotted away long before I got there in 1979, and now we have 16-foot pilings and a superstructure. So we're a whole lot better off than we used to be in terms of what we can withstand. But when we did that, we tried to go solar, and we worked with Steve Johnson here locally and we got a solar credit. We got a $50,000 credit to be able to do solar on the Sandbar. I was going to be so proud of that, and it was going to do 10% of my energy. And, it was another layer of the onion that we could talk about, are the things that we were doing. And we went to the city of Anna Maria, and we said, look, this is where we need to do it. It's on the south side of the restaurant. It's the only place we can do it. And you've got at the beach access right there, you've got a bunch of Australian pine trees. You may like them. I don't. They're not native, and they're terrible for the environment below. And the state has a mandate that says you will get rid of them. And my city of Anna Maria said to me, no, we're not going to cut. We're not going to trim. We are not going to top those Australian pines. And so we lost that $75,000 system, of which we had a 50, and it just makes no sense. And so everybody has got to be willing to come together, to get out of our damn comfort zone a little bit, or get out of our mindsets. You talked about whether we're debating, but we still are debating climate change on the national level, unfortunately. And I hope we stop doing that.
Well, thanks to the 3 of you to bringing this conference to a practical conclusion, with what people can actually do. And not to get too down in the weeds, Ed, but would you please educate me? You mentioned the leasing of land to plant the oysters. Who owns the land? Who has to lease it? And what's that about?
It's sovereign, so it's owned by the state of Florida. Those leases are controlled by the Department of Environmental Protection. We're working with those folks to try to get a better understanding of what the clam farmers need. I'll tell you about a little program that we're doing in Braden Beach right now. Our CRA, Community Redevelopment Authority, of which I sit on, they're doing a little inland district, or a channel that comes into the city pier there, Rod, where you can bring your boat. And they were talking about seagrass mitigation, and we said, hey, well, what about clams? Because we're all about clams out there. Well, you can't get mitigation credits for clams. Well, why the heck not? So we'll go work with our policy makers on that, and I think that is something that we can get through. Gosh, I got to tell you, I'm a big Democrat, but I'm delighted about the moves that this new governor's making. This is like Nixon goes to China. I think it's brilliant politically to just, and if Donald Trump had any damn sense, he'd jump in front of the parade too and say, I'm going to be the environmental president for Florida and win the Electoral College next time for Florida. But what we did where the city pier is down there on Bridge Street in Braden Beach is we bought 200,000 clams from a clam farmer that are mature clams, but because the clam farmer's in trouble. We want the guys to farm clams. We got 1% of the 287,000 acres leased, and so we want to incentivize those people to do that. But that clam farmer, Carter Davis in Pine Island, who's a young man with a family, and it's go, Carter, go, is not going to put another crop in the ground because the red tide has closed him out. And his clams have become less valuable now because the white tablecloth slot limit for optimization of getting his financial gain is little neck, middle neck, top neck. Quahogs, big mature clams, are chowder clams, and they're not as valuable. But we bought 200,000 of his clams that we paid him 16 cents a piece for. And he gets $32,000 because those are now more valuable to our community as broodstock clams. They are bulletproof. They are hard shell. They are big. They are tough. Everything eats clams and little mussels when they're small. But when they're big like that, and they live another 33 years. So what we need to say, because our clam farmers don't have insurance, is policymakers give us a program we can go to those people and we can buy those mature clams, take them off their lease, pay them so they can plant another crop and put them anywhere in the state of Florida. It doesn't matter if it's shellfish-approved waters or not, because for 33 more years they're going to clean water and they're going to produce billions of clam larvae that are going to go through the water column and may land on your back dock or may land in shellfish-approved waters or may not, but they're going to do their job for the next 33 years. So.
If I may really quick, Ed, I just want to tell you, you violated the political agreement.
Well, listen, I'm sorry I got here late. So.
All I'm going to say is you owe me dinner at the boathouse. And we have a question here.
Okay, I wondered, it's been a great conference. Thank you very much for organizing this. I had a question on what you think about the rapid local development that's continuing in this area and what the impact that's going to have on climate change and what mitigation strategies all of us could take on that.
Well, I got to tell you a story that's not that funny, but I'll tell you the story. So we have a building, downtown Sarasota, that was built 2011. I might be off a year. And I got called in, and as board of directors, and they're in a panic. And I go, I'm seeing sweat pour down. And they're like, what's the situation? They got an invoice from Flood for $230,000. And their previous flood policy was like $30,000. And I'm like, uh-oh, that's a problem, right? And so we look at this, and what happened was they're on the street level, and when you go down into their garage, building above, parking underneath, street level, you went down a little bit. Well, there's a clause, always been there. If you go down, it's considered a basement. So the parking is now a basement. The rate for a basement is a little bit more. Some of you might have experienced this. Now, fortunately, we brought in an engineer and worked through this and figured this out to the benefit of the association. But not everybody can benefit from this. So to your point of what can we do is we have to understand the rules of engagement. And part of it is that was an element of policy that was already in the documents for flood. We somehow allow the building to be built, and then we worry about the problems later because somehow it got overlooked. And that wasn't the only infrastructure at that time that was dealing with this. There was a number of them. So part of it, we have to stop thinking all about the almighty dollar of development. We have to get smart about what we're doing and why, and what is our footprint, and how can that footprint be done the correct way, not only thinking about today, but 50 years out, 30 years out, because some of the buildings are around 72, 82, 83, 84. I deal with all these type of properties. They're going to be around a while. So do it correctly first and allow that not thinking about 2019, but thinking about 2069, whatever the date may be. So I got issues with that because some of the stuff that even gets done with code and permitting, 4, 5, 6 years later gets slapped in the face and they have no idea why this happened to them. That's a big pill to swallow if they had to pay that flood bill. Flood is not decreasing in premium, in rates. It's a problem.
Do I have a second to answer that? Save the hardest question for last or second to last. No, that's a big issue, and from my perspective, I see a good and bad associated with it. I worry with the rapid development we're seeing and the level of impervious surface and just sheer coastal development and what it's doing to our stormwater system and the upgrades that we need to do to deal with that and how the impacts to our water quality. What I do think is somewhat of a benefit that folks might not want to see so much or readily is that if people aren't driving in as much and they live and work more in the area where they are recreating and living, that can be more positive for the environment than suburban sprawl where you're living further away from where you might work or draw. So I think some of the development of housing near a workforce can be a positive thing for a community. And it also can be efficient for energy use per capita and per square footage, and it can be better for some of the planning for stormwater and pumping and wastewater and water pumping, because the per capita space for all that can be a little more efficient. But there are challenges associated with it as well. So I think there's there's kind of two edges of that coin from my perspective.
In the onset, in the beginning, we heard that Florida had the opportunity to be the leader, the global leader in terms of responding to this climate change and come up with various solutions. And I really appreciate the distinguished guests focusing on those related topics in a micro level. In terms of taking on those challenges, I can see that why small cities can have that agenda on their own plan that might say 2030 will be energy independence of fossil energy. If cities and municipalities can take on those challenges, that's a very strong message at the grassroots level that our local government do care. And so it really doesn't matter what happens in the political domain, but those are the small initiatives that can take on by a restaurant owner with the full support of the restaurant, with the city council and others. And I think that would, as well as the related education on recycling, on composting, not sending material to land. So there are hundreds of different activities that the new generation of young people can take on, where the city funding could be better utilized by education, where we have plenty of support. But those are some of the action items that could be taken on moving forward in addressing this greater challenge, that we can be an example. We can set a goal that certain cities will be 100% renewable, will be recycling 100% of water. And I do not necessarily agree that government cannot be efficient. Just look at a country like Singapore. Look at countries such as Qatar, which is in the middle of the ocean, but every drop of water is generated by desalination. So these are some really key technical challenges that we haven't even talked about, but there are things that as we get into a warmer climate, we'll be addressing water issues at a more deeper level, and we have to be prepared, and our future generation should be ready for that. And municipalities and small government can play a big part in that.
So we don't need to wait for someone else to solve our problem.
I just want to say, as someone that's very involved in the tourist economy here, that is the best thing that we could do for that industry here, because people want that. Millennials want that. Everybody wants that. And that's the person that you want, that's the family you want to attract. They appreciate your values, they share your values, they're well educated, they have money, and they leave a light footprint.
Well, thank you very much on behalf of Science and Environment Council. Let's give our panelists a warm thank you.
Well, thank you very much to the final group. Jennifer and the panel, I think that before we got one more small session. We have the Dr. Holbrook, David, and Bob would like to make some concluding remarks. And I want to personally thank you as well for spending the day with us. I thought it would be really neat to end it if I could get a grand piano and an ice flow and come out here and play something for you. But I got the piano, but I couldn't get the ice flow, so I apologize. So at this point, I'd like to, you want to come individually then, and I'll invite Dr. Holbrook to have some concluding remarks. Oh, sorry, also for the speakers, we have a little gift for all the speakers. We do want to take a group photo, so if the speakers come afterwards, we would like that as well. So,
I'm going to be very quick. Let me just say thank you to every one of the speakers. There was so much passion. There was so much good material all day long that kept everybody's attention, and I thank every one of you for all of the things you did. I think, Bob, the title of this, Adapting to a Changing Climate, Challenges and Opportunities. We heard lots of challenges, But I think what's the most important part is we heard what are the opportunities that are coming out of those challenges. And these opportunities are for collaboration, or for coordination, for cooperation, and for bringing things together, which I know when you come with your final, you're going to reiterate that, because Bob sees the big picture and how it's put together. What we saw today was a lot of very, very good thinking from different perspectives, from different points of view, and from different mindsets. But yet everybody saw a way that they can come back together and work together from it. So there was an awful lot of really good thinking today. And I'm going to come back with some words that I heard, because I really like words and I like the way people put them together. So I loved the comments of energy, environment, education, and economics. That's exactly what we did today. It's exactly what we heard, and that's exactly how all of these have to come together, along with innovation, inspiration, investment, and integration. I think that just sums up what everybody said today. And then I loved what you said also: know, assess, plan, act. And behind all of that is motivation. That's a very important word, and it's there from all of the kinds of things that we said today. So thanks to everyone who spoke. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to David for really starting this. Thank you to Bob for putting a great thing together, and thank you for all the thinkers. There were a number of people who planned this symposium, and for everyone, I think you did a great service, and my only hope is that this motivation will take us to another level. So thank you very much, everybody. David?
I don't know what I would add to that. I'll tell you, at the end of a day that started at 8 a.m., standing here now is like being Elizabeth Taylor's sixth husband. I knew what we had to do here today. I just hope we made it interesting for you. I just tell you the Global Interdependence Center enjoys being a part of this and this relationship. Bob, why don't you close?
Thank you. Thanks, David. And thank you, Karen. And thank you, USF staff. Haven't they been amazing? So this has just been everything I had hoped. And the reason is that we got off the dime today. And it's been difficult. You would think that dime was $1, or maybe $100 or $1,000, but we did it. And we did it because all of you care, and all of you obviously are here because you want to engage in this, one of the world's greatest problems. Climate warming, short of nuclear annihilation, to me, is one of the top 2 or 3 problems of our time. Yet it's a huge opportunity, and we live in a very vulnerable place. But we heard today about a lot of opportunities for adaptation and for mitigation. But what has been missing is a forum like this, where we can bring multidisciplinary experts and interested people together in the same place at the same time to talk about how we move forward. This was a great success in that part, but it's an example. If we leave here today and this is the end, I won't be happy. To me, this is the beginning. And I think what we have done today is integrate. We created a common view of the climate warming and how it's affecting Florida and how it's affecting the Sarasota area. We have brought in CEOs and government officials who are grappling with this. They're all trying to find a common view, yet there's no place to go for it. So out of this, I hope that we're going to set up a climate adaptation center, the first one, right here in Sarasota, to create that integrating factor and organize the 3 spheres that we have: academia, the private sector, and government. By pushing those spheres together, we create an overlap, and in the middle of that blur, is what I call it, is the climate
Adaptation Center. Somebody needs to do it. It doesn't exist today. Why not us, and why not now? But to do it, it's going to cost money. We have to put all the sectors together. We have to jumpstart this for a while to get it going so that we can bring others into it. And eventually, I think it will be a self-funding enterprise that has huge impacts for a small investment. So if you're interested in what I just said and what happened here today, and you want to see it happen again, then we'll be in touch. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it, and have a great afternoon.